Boom. And there we are, part
All
two.
right.
Okay. So I want to talk about, because you've done a lot of auditions like in this time, from my understanding. I mean, I haven't talked to you much in the last 4 years, but the times that I have, I know that you were auditioning for stuff. Um, so could you tell us a little about your what kind of auditions you were going for and like how you prepped for them, depending on whatever the rep was or whatever ensemble it was?
Yeah. So the original, I was pretty disheartened, I think, from my master's, if I'm being honest. I would apply for auditions that I thought I was qualified for, um, and wouldn't be accepted to that audition. So I don't want to say I thought that ship had sailed, but I was like, okay, well, I can't even, get invited. So I'm not going to pour a ton of my energy into this when it almost feels unattainable. And when I started at UNT, Dr. Mannix she like an audition would show up and she'd email me immediately. She'd be like, "Hey, you should really go for this. I think you'd be a good fit." Um, and I was like, "Okay, I'll audition. I want to be a state professor who performs. Like, this is just a different path to get there. I'll go for it." I'm like, and I'm gonna probably teach somebody someday who wants to take these sort of auditions. And I can't do that genuinely unless I've been through that process. So if I wanted to teach somebody later and they wanted to do this, it was something I would have to do so I would know how to show them. So I started taking auditions my first year. I think the first big one I took was Jacksonville. And I felt okay about the list. Didn't finish the first round list. It's like, yikes. Um, so I was upset by that. But then a friend that I went there with who had just advanced at the Vancouver audition got cut in the first round too. So he was a little more experienced in auditioning than I was, and he would tell me things like, well, you never know what they're looking for on that day. He's like, I've been stopped before I finished the list in one place and advanced to semifinals in the next. He's like, you never really know what's going to go with it. He's like, you just have to go in and do your thing. So I started to get a little bit more serious about it at that point, and that's when things really turned around. So the first thing that I did in audition prep leading up to the later ones where I perform much better was I did the same thing that I had started doing in my own personal practice. Like, okay, I need to get organized and understand what this timeline is. So all of the excerpts, I printed them all out and I made like 3 spiral bound notebooks. The one that I would most often use was just in my case. It was in my case at all times. I can pull it out. I can do whatever I want. I would have one in my backpack, and that was if somebody was listening to me, I could hand them the excerpt book, right? If I was doing a mock, I could hand them a book of the excerpts. And then I kept one in my mute bag. So if I showed up somewhere and there was going to be a long portion of this where you're like, oh, well, trombones, go outside, something else is happening, or somebody go do this, then I could, at that moment, even if my case was backstage or somewhere else, I could grab that out of my bag immediately and go behind the building or something and get work done. The next thing that I did is I would divide these lists into like sub lists. And this could be, I try to go through these sub lists evenly, right? I'm not just like, this is my loud excerpts, this is my soft ones. I would try and make it balanced throughout them. The excerpts that I had down, even memorized, that I felt really great about, like my money excerpts, where when they call that on the list, I'm like, yeah, y'all are going down. This is mine. And then excerpts where when they call it, I'm like, flight. So I wanted them to be balanced in that. The reason is I had 3 envelopes, and you can do whatever, ABC, like red, white, blue, whatever you want to call it. And each day I would work on a different envelope, and it would be random. So I would warm up like an hour of fundamentals, an hour of routine, and then I would pick a random envelope, and I couldn't use that envelope the next day. And I would do the first half of an envelope in a session or two, and then the second half. And then along with all of that, I'm also listening. So I had a playlist on Spotify, and that was going constantly. Like, wake up, shower, it's on. Driving, it's on. Walking to and from places, it's on. Before I play that excerpt or work on it, I'm listening to it. And the reason why I have those envelopes that I thought were well balanced is it's very easy for us to go like, oh, well, I need to work on something. I do Hungarian March, right? You already know it. And it's easy to go like, oh, well, I'm chopped. I can't work on like till today. So it eliminated that. And no matter how I was feeling on that day, I didn't know what excerpts were going to be in that envelope, but I knew that I was going to touch all of the envelopes every 3 days. So I knew that in that 3-day period, I was going to do detailed work on all of them in a variety of situations, with a variety of comfort levels for me personally. So that took away some of the mystique of how do you turn it on and are able to play when you're chopped or you just don't feel good, right? You're having a bad day or you're in a weird room and it freaks you out. Is that going to change the way you play this excerpt? So having those 3 envelopes and being organized before, I think that helped me quite a bit. So then for me, it's like 3 weeks out from the date of the audition. It goes less from really small shedding sessions to I'm doing at least 1 mock audition a day and taking notes, if not 2. So I would do these mocks and I would try to do 1 or 2 really big mock auditions a week. So I was doing a mock each day, which was, okay, Zach, this is the performance, like get in that mindset. You have to be centered before you go to this audition. And that would just be me in my office with a recorder or 1 person if I could find them. And then I tried to do big mocks where I would have at least 1 person, if not 2 to 3 to make it a real panel and check out a big room on campus. And I would do those big mocks. I would try to do at least 1 a week. And I found that doing those mock auditions for people you know is so much worse than being totally anonymous when you show up to the audition. So that helps so much with my nerves. I don't get nervous at auditions now. I show up and I've done enough of them where I have my process. I know the things that I need to do for me to feel confident. But when I'm walking on that stage, I'm not freaking out. I feel very, very calm. And that's a great advantage to have, I think. Now, the second I make my first mistake, that's when the real game starts. And that's when I have to make sure I stay in that good space rather than immediately panicking. Or another pitfall is going back to practice mode. I remember distinctly in 1 audition, I played something poorly and the thought I had was like, oh, I'll have to shed that later. Like, well, I'm not practicing right now. Like, I can't control that note that just came out. Like, sorry, it's over. You know, like I can let that mistake turn into 2 mistakes by not staying focused, or I can double down on the music and try and keep going through. So doing these mocks, you also have to get out of practice mindset and into a performance and audition based mindset, which I think is really, really difficult.
Yeah.
So I would do like 4 to 6 excerpts for each round, and I would try to make them make sense. So I would be doing a mock, and if somebody else was there, I was like, yeah, so then for this first round, pick some standard first round excerpts and then throw a wild card in there. Or be like, be intentionally mean to me. Put ride and then make me play Rhenish right after that. After I've just gotten done playing double forte, play soft. That sucks. I don't like it when they do that to me. Or showing up and it just being an off the wall excerpt that I didn't think was going to be in that first or second round, like a section excerpt. So I made people give me weird lists, and then also plausible lists. So I haven't really been caught off guard showing up somewhere. I'm like, well, Harry Janosch is on the first round. I'm like, that's fine because I've practiced that scenario. So I worked on also mindfulness and centering my mind during this last 2-3 week process as well. Like, what do I need to think about to shift gears in between these excerpts? So I would write 3 words at the top of each excerpt. And I give myself permission to have like 1 trombone one, but that's usually the least important. So for Hungarian March, I have energetic. I have the word diction because I wanted a very clear articulation that doesn't change. And then, did I already say heroic?
Nope.
Okay, heroic is my last one. And it's because I think that sounds heroic, right? It's like a national song that people love and it's exciting. It was thrown into the opera for no reason, just because people would dig it. So I try to play it with that sort of enthusiasm. So I'd remind myself what I needed, and then I could switch to the next excerpt and have new words up there, help me shift gears. I would put together sections as well in some of these bigger auditions so that I could actually play with people, like a fake section round. Because that's terrifying. even once you feel like you understand the game for first and second round or even finals, that when it comes down to other people playing with you and you have to almost close your ears to yourself and just copy, that's totally different. It's freaky. It's weird if you haven't practiced that scenario.
Mm-hmm.
So the first time I ended up in a section round, I just like kind of pooped. Like, I don't know what's happening. Like, oh, this is weird. Like, so I need to do more of this in my next auditions. So working on this that way took me from getting cut in the first round to auditions with pre-screenings, being one of the people that was invited, to being invited to, so the biggest audition I've done well at was the Pershing Zone, so the Army band, the sit-down concert band. And I really locked in. I felt like I understood the process that I needed to do. It wasn't my first time doing an Army audition, so I knew what to expect in that process. And I went in and I played my first round, and I thought I played terribly. Like, I had packed my horn up. I was like, yeah, so I'm not making it out of this. There were only like, wow, I think 8 dudes there or something. Because they did a pre-screening round first. So I had to send in a tape, and based off that tape, you show up, you know, you're already in the last little bit of people. So that felt really good. And I thought I was done after the first round. And the guy who went to the Jacksonville audition with me, Ethan Scholl, he had won the ceremonial band audition that we had both been invited to like 3 months before or something.
Wow.
So I had a friend there who we had been to auditions together, and I really thought, like, I texted him, I was like, hey dude, so we're going to need to go get like a lot of beer. I just played real bad. But then they announced who was advancing, and I was like, oh shit, like that was my name. Like that was my number. So I like panicked, and I learned something there too. And it's like, don't count yourself out until they have said who's advancing. So I advanced to the semifinal round and had to panically throw my horn back together, right? And that I had to really center myself again. It was really tough because I had already mentally cut myself. So I had to reestablish. I got all the way through the list. They asked me to play, I think it was Fountains again. So that made me feel good. They're like, okay, so they like what they got. They want to see if I can change. And I didn't make it past the semifinal round, but I felt that I played very, very well in the semifinal round. And the thought that I had in that moment was, if I make it to finals, this is mine. Like that's the momentum that I felt like I had in that semifinal round, was if I make it, like it's mine. There's no way it isn't. And I think that mindset was so much more positive than going in and being like, I'll see you what happens. Yeah. So I felt so much better going into that based off of my preparation. Was bummed that I missed out that close to a forever job. The guy that won it was great. Is Kyle Gordon. He was in the Houston Grand Opera, and he's really good. So he won the job. I didn't feel like I had been robbed. Another guy in that audition later ended up in the West Point band. So the people, and one of the guys that I made it, I think he's in a regional orchestra somewhere and had subbed with Cleveland a few times. So the guys that I was in that semifinal round with, like, weren't, you know, like schmucks, right? They were really good. Yeah. So I felt better about that. So then at that point I had gotten, that was like my first like real big boy advance. Right. Yeah. And after that I thought, like, so this could like actually happen. Like, I didn't really think this was real. I thought that I would go in and like be okay and like just kind of know what the process was like for my future students. I didn't think this was like real. Positive. Like, it really changed the way I was approaching to it from then on out. I had a really good streak of advancing. I don't know if I should name the job.
You don't have to.
I won't.
Okay.
I was a finalist. I was runner-up for a job.
Okay.
And that audition I felt very, very good about. And it was my first exposure to a final round. And it was like, here we go. Like, I've never done this before. And I was just happy to be in a final round. Yeah. And I kind of had the same thought. I'm like, so this can actually be mine. And the guy that I was competing against at that moment is a freak, is like a fully developed full grown player, like
Yeah.
well respected in the community. And I felt like, so if I'm the only other guy in this audition that can stand at the end, like that makes me feel really good about that. And a lot of the guys that I had been that showed up to the audition too, you see the same people on the audition circuit, and it starts to become like, oh, well, yeah, great, you're here, sweet. So those people that had showed up, I had seen a lot of people who had advanced when I hadn't advanced or had finished rounds or were very good. So I felt pretty stinking good about myself, and I was runner up. And somebody ended up telling me after that, like, you were our favorite sound of the day.
Oh, wow.
You had won the tone quality. They're like, but there were just a few other things that were sticking out. They're like, intonation. They're like, was there a big one? So after that, I've been on a quest, an intonation quest, because that's been consistent along other things. And I think once it's really that efficiency in getting organized and sticking to that plan, that I think made a huge difference there. And I took that same approach to last year at the International Women's Brass Conference too. It's like cash prizes for things. It's an international thing. Like I win, I get a pretty stinking cool stamp on my resume that I didn't have yet. So remember I told you I was a trash person. So I was never in the running for any of the ITF things. I was still figuring out how to be a human. So I did the same thing. I had the solos that I was gonna play for them. I took all of the excerpts. There was a mock orchestra, mock band, and then a solo competition. I was like, I'm gonna do all three of them, and I'm gonna just commit my time to this. And then I swept it. So it was, I won the bass trombone, like top age group. I won the mock band audition, and I was honorable mention at the mock orchestra. And I actually think I got a check in the mail later that said that I was actually the winner of the mock orchestra, but they had messed something up. So I got another check in the mail later.
Oh, heck yeah.
So that, along with like, okay, I did advanced. Okay, I'm a runner up. Okay, I just swept these competitions against really great people. It's like literally an international contest. And like, I'm feeling pretty good. And all of that is because of efficiency and organization.
Yeah. So the mental game that you keep talking about, like mentally locking it in, or like all the headspace stuff, like I know that you were kind of touching on like the trombone side of the mental side, if that makes sense. But was there any like mental things on the mental side of things that you did? So like, I don't know, like any sort of meditation or like just a way, because there is a way, like I understand what you're telling me by like, I did this to control my mind in this scenario, but in order, like, I don't know, was there another level of like mental discipline you took outside of maybe trombone playing to help the trombone, like the
Yes.
audition stuff?
Yeah. So yeah, let's just open this can. How much longer do we have in our little free session here?
We're at 17 minutes right now, so we've got like 25 or so.
Cool. So I absolutely had to have, there was a different part to this journey of finding efficiency and organization, and balance, really. I mean, if I'm practicing for 6 hours a day and have other classes and ensembles, right? Like I didn't have balance in my life, in my master's. So I started doing mindfulness exercises because I was given a book, Effortless Mastery by Werner. So I was reading through that and practicing those mindfulness things. And I noticed that when I felt centered and relaxed, I was like, okay, so what, I did some other meditation courses as well to work on this mindfulness. And it was like, so what am I feeling right now? Like, what's my baseline for the day? And I noticed that more often than not, it was like my baseline for the day is I feel no motivation, not feeling too great about myself, and I'm really anxious. So I kept working on this mindfulness, doing what I thought I needed to do, and kept finding that my baseline was not a healthy baseline. And that came to a head at a point in my master's. I don't know if either of y'all remember it, but I ended up showing up to school one day and it looked like I had gotten sunburned. And it wasn't, I hadn't gone out anywhere. I went to like Dr. Mixor's office. He was like, hey, did you get some sun? And I'm like, nah, I think it's just from stress. He's
I
like,
do.
okay,
I don't
so let's
remember
talk
that.
about this. So there were some other factors that were going on that contributed to that stress. Um, but another big part of it was I just didn't have any sort of like balance going on in my life, right? So I would get up, I would like rock a 12, 14-hour day, go home, be like, great, 2 beers, whatever sport is on, go to bed, do it again. And going like that for so long, you ignore um, warning signs that come at you. You're at mentally and physically. It's like, okay, so like I'm getting like, and my master's like, okay, I'm gaining weight. Like I'm fatter now, but my practice time is sacred. So I'm not sacrificing any of this. I'm just going to say, screw it. I'll get in shape when I win an audition, when I get what I want. Right. Or saying like, wow, I'm really not feeling good today. Like, let's say there was something else, like a dog died or something like that. Like, I'm really not feeling it. And rather than prioritizing, making sure that I was going to be okay long term, I'd be like, well, guess what? Doesn't matter. You got to get in the room and you got to win. So I would ignore these things, and it ended up coming to a headed a point in my master's, and then also in my first year of my doctorate. And I found out that I was doing all the things for mindfulness to try and work on getting yourself into that centered state to go to an audition. But there was something else there that I couldn't work past. So I spent a lot of money at like a testing center on my campus. I'm like, hey, so I don't know what's going on, but I know it's not okay. Like I shouldn't feel like this. It should not, like for the amount of things that I see myself accomplishing, for where I've ended up here, I was like, I'm financially secure. I was like, I have a fantastic significant other who's my fiance now. Like I felt like I'm doing all these things. So why do I feel like trash? Like, why do I hate me? And going through this, it was, I think like 4 to 6 weeks, I think, of going in once a week for like multiple hours. And it was with like psychiatrist people. I'm like, look, if it's just like, I don't care where we end up. Like if we get at the end of this and like, no, like you're fine. This is normal. That's what you feel as a grad student. Like eat healthier. You're like, okay, cool. So this is just what it feels like to be a grad student. Like, so I don't really care what they say at the end of it. And I got to the end and they're like, so you, like the way that you talk to us, we don't see any signs. So like, but based off of some body language things and how you've answered these questionnaires and what you say your baseline feelings are, like we went through like, it was like the whole gamut, right? They're like, you are suffering from depression and anxiety. Like, it's like textbook. Like you pick at your skin. I was like, what? And like, they told me that if there was like a hair that was longer, I would just sit there and like talk to them and be like, or that's like, so what happens when you have downtime in the middle of the day? And I'm like, usually I just try to like immediately distract myself or go back deeper into the music. Like, what happens if you don't do that? Try that this week. And I found out that I would just sit there and just be like, just totally exhausted. And I had pushed myself so hard and ignored that word balance to the point where even though I was doing everything that I was supposed to do to make the progress that I wanted, to take the steps that I wanted to, it was not healthy because of where I was. And people say things like, well, you have to, find where that balance is personally and professionally. But how can you find that balance if you don't know what your fulcrum is, right? And I had definitely found what the other end of that was, where my freshman year at college, definitely on the other end, wasn't taking care of anything I needed to do, just prioritizing a good time. And then through my master's, through the first year of my doctorate, prioritizing only doing work, having a good time doesn't matter. You'll have a good time after you have the job, blah, blah, blah. Like, get over it. Just get in there, do the work. So that was kind of shocking. And then when I went and I told my mom about it, and she was like, oh yeah, we have tons of people in our family that have like mental health issues. I'm like, why didn't you tell me? Like, I don't know, we didn't talk about it. I'm like, okay, so you're telling me like this is a thing that I could have like kept an eye out for, but I just was like, no, just gonna get back in there and grind. So I had to really pull back. and talk to Nichelle about it and figure out what I needed to do this healthily. Because I was pushing myself not only toward like just not being mentally healthy, I was also pushing myself to the point where I was threatening burnout. So from there, I had to really become aware of what I would do that would make myself feel these ways, right? Like, why am I anxious right now? And it's like, oh, well, you know, maybe you haven't practiced today, or you haven't answered your emails. Or like, you know that you're not doing what you're supposed to do, and you're gonna feel really guilty about it around 7 or 8 p.m. this Saturday, dude. Where it's like, so why don't I feel like I have any motivation right now? It's like, well, you didn't sleep. You slept for like 5.5, 6 hours. You got up to go teach marching band, and you went through another 12-hour day. You came home and you're trying to hang out with your fiance, because that's what you need to do, like to be a good partner, but you don't have anything left. So I found what that balance point was, because I had gone so far in the other direction. And once I really started taking care of my mental health was when my advancing or finishing rounds went from being sporadic to being consistent. To where when I go there, I'm like, okay, so I know that I'm good enough to get to the semifinal round, and I know that I'm good enough to be knocking on finals. Like, and I feel good enough because I've taken care of myself, right? I've made a plan. I'm not just going in and like blindly doing the work. I see what my life is. I'm taking notes. All of that helped me so much with my performance, with my teaching. It feels so much more positive now. So I guess what I would say with that is a large part of that mental side of the audition is you have to be in a place where you can trust yourself under that stress. And the only way that you do that is by simulating that environment, right? Doing those mock auditions, doing what you need to do, but also realizing that you have to take care of your body to really be able to rely on yourself when you're in that high pressure state. You have to be able to trust your mind not to crack or revert into some negative self-talk or an intrusive thought. And if those two things aren't there, then how am I supposed to trust that my musicality is going to be there? Or that if we get to an interview or a section round, that when they see me, they're going to see somebody they can work with and not just like, whoa, this dude's not taking care of himself. So those things I saw were just as important. And I've gotten to where I won't sacrifice sleep, like no matter what. Like if I have something I really need to do, I'm like, I need to get 8 hours or I'm not going to be my best self when I'm teaching or driving or performing tomorrow. So I have to take care of that. I have to make sure that I have a plan and balance. If I have a recital this week and all I do is practice the whole week, my face is going to be trashed. If I don't practice at all that week or play at all, I'm going to show up, my face isn't going to work. Right? So I had to understand what those balance points were for me. And then I guess the last one is I found that I was willing to sacrifice my time and my own productivity for somebody else. So if I were doing something like, great, so now I get like an awesome 2-hour block to practice. I just have to get through the last second half of this envelope, and then I can practice some recital rep. And if a student came knocking on my door, like, hey, I think I really need help with this right now. Like, can you help me with this excerpt? Can you help me with this? I would always be like, yeah, get in here, let's do it. But that was, wow, in a vacuum, a good thing to do, right? I'm helping this student. I'm being the teacher that I wanted to be. I'm investing in them, right? It took so much energy away that when I would go to practice again, I would either have to just be like, oh, well, just shut up and do it. And just like grind away almost mindlessly. Or just falling back on like, I don't know, I'll slow it down 50% and put on a drone. Because you're exhausted. So I had to value my own time, be like, hey, I'd love to help you with this. I have office hours. We can find another coaching session. And I'm like, but right now I have to make sure I take care of some of my own business. And I was very willing to do that for anybody in any facet of my life. And so on the other end, since I know I have that personality trait, I'm assuming that other people do too, especially a lot of teachers that are very compassionate, right? Empathetic, that have been there before. I have to, if I'm calling somebody to vent, I ask them like, hey, are you in a place right now where like I can vent and talk about this? Or no? And let people decide, yeah, I can hear you out right now. They're like, I'm super swamped. Can we talk later? We're giving them the opportunity to let me know where they are as well. So yeah, the mental health side was huge. I didn't know how much that was holding me back until I started practicing mindfulness and feeling what my baseline, I was like, oh, my baseline emotion is like, I'm upset and freaked out. But that's not good. I should keep working on that. I kept working on it, did the things, did the therapy, did all this stuff. I'm like, well, it's still there. That's not cool. Like I should like figure this out. So then I took the steps and figured it out. It's like having a busted slide. I mean, you can just say like, well, shut up. That's not gonna stop you from practicing. Or you can go like, yeah, dude, you should get that fixed because you shouldn't show up to this audition with a dent in your slide, right? Or a trigger that like is really slow or sometimes gets stuck, right? You wouldn't show up with subpar equipment or hopefully with subpar preparation. So why was I allowing myself show up with a subpar mental state, a subpar opinion about myself, right? Of course that's going to sabotage you. So it was huge. I would really recommend Effortless Mastery to people that have some issues with that. I could keep going on it too. I noticed that in my own playing, I was very, very self-critical at all times, and I wasn't able to turn it off. So I had to work on that as well. And then Audition Success and Performance Success, I thought were two very good books that helped me find that balance point and be able to do something that's so demanding and so difficult, like working on an audition list and being able to do it in a healthy way. So I could rant on it forever. I think it was huge for me. So
No, that's good. Yeah, I don't really even have words. It's just nice to, I don't know, hear
yeah,
about
and it's
it.
okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
Like it's okay to like wake up one day and be like, man, like this sucks. And you can just acknowledge that. You're like, yeah, you're super stressed out. You're not feeling great right now. That's fine. Like, do you need to take a day? That's cool. If you really need to, you can take that day. It's like, you can take one step forward today. Do 20 minutes on intonation and then let yourself like veg out. Go hang out with somebody. Like talk to somebody. Engage in a hobby, which I straight up did not have for like 6 years. It was one of the things they talked to me about. They're like, so what are your hobbies? I'm like, I don't know, practicing. Well, that's not good.
Yeah.
So you should find something else to do as well. So yeah, I think it all helps so much. And if anybody's on the fence about it, I'm just like, yeah, just go try it. Like go like talk to somebody who's like, and get a private lesson for your brain from somebody who is trained to do that. And either it helps you and you go, oh, there's something to that, or it doesn't. And you go, oh, well, it didn't work. Right? You don't have anything to lose at that point. So that's my rant on it. So
what is your hobby? Did you find one?
yeah, cooking.
Mm.
Cooking is definitely my thing now. Even through like lockdown, I was like, okay, I'm going to master like my homemade everything pizza recipe.
Yeah.
So that's helped so much, is just having something else to do. And I think that if your hobby is a healthy hobby, it translates to the other things that you're doing as well. I'm sure y'all have your own corollaries, but Nichelle picked up gardening, and I can see that her watching that progress, there's a parallel from that to her and her students, right, in her middle school band. I've really enjoyed looking at a process, planning ahead for it, making sure it's in proportion, and that I use the right tools, right?
Yeah.
That's cooking, like literally just cooking, right?
Yeah.
So these things I think are more often than not related, and I think are healthy and help each other. There's a very negative mindset in I think the music community, where it's very easy for us to I've said jock like a few times, like just be a trombone jock or a music jock.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what do you do outside of that? They're like, I don't know, sleep. right? And it's like, okay. And then it's very easy to push yourself that hard and totally burn out. And I didn't want that to be me.
Yeah. Okay. Dude, that's sorry. We got like 5 minutes left on this one. So just
No
to save
worries.
ourselves, we're just gonna hop over to part 3. And if we need to, I'll make a part 4. I didn't create the meeting for it, but we can definitely create a part 4 if we need to.
Cool. One of
So
my other hobbies is fantasy football. I have a fantasy football draft at 4:30 today, so we got to make sure we're done by that.
oh heck yeah. Yeah, we'll make that happen.
See
Okay,
y'all
we're
on
gonna
part 3.
hop over to part 3.